welcome to our little evening session here with Ludic Language Pedagogy. Before we get started, I did want to introduce our sponsors yet again, who are holistic think tank, Cortico, Antioch University, Education Evolving with Teacher-Powered Schools, Unruler, and of course you all for making this event possible. We appreciate you. More information about our sponsors can be found in the links in our YouTube description as well as on our Discord. Again, I want to thank you all for being here. Joining us are Dr. James York and Dr. Jonathan Dahan from Ludic Language Pedagogy out in Japan, doing some cool work out there with language learning and a bunch of really interesting ludic gamey stuff, which I'm sure they're going to dive into here in a second. But I'm just going to give you all the floor, and I'm super stoked to learn more about the work and see what we're going to do today.
All right, thank you very much, Chris. Yeah, thanks for the warm introduction. I am a doctor. I just remembered. Yeah. So yeah, I'm James, and this is Jonathan.
Hi.
Taking you through a kind of workshop for the next hour about what we mean by this term ludic and finding the freedom to play in education. So I'm going to share a Google document link in the chat, and I'll also share my screen, which has the same document. So you can feel free to either look at it yourselves or check my screen, which is there, share screen. And I want to share
because there are places in the Google document where we'd like you to write things and share your context and your ideas. So this is a playground for you to explore and do what you want with. Please don't delete the document.
Or don't, you know,
whatever. Or do, yeah, there we go. Yeah, that would be
extremely playful
of them. Yeah.
So yeah, I was just saying to Chris, I'm extremely nervous today. This is the first time I've been nervous doing a conference presentation in a long time, actually, in a very long time. I think it's because I'm a little bit outside of my bubble. I normally talk to teachers of languages and, you know, primarily second language teachers, and I'm speaking to a very broad swath of people here, so it's just got me a little bit shook up. But yeah, just know that I'm nervous, so if I say things and a bit weird like now, that's why. All right, so in this document then, let me just zoom in. I've got a script here basically, so that'll help me. So the idea of this talk is to think about what it means to have the freedom to play in your context. So we're primarily talking to teachers, and like I said, me and Jonathan, we're based in Japan, and we're language teachers originally, I guess, but moving much more towards literacy in general. And so the audience, I guess, would be anyone that's teaching literacy. But when we start thinking about literacy, we realize that actually everything is literacy, literally everything. You know, you can think about game literacy, you can think about, well, books, scientific literacy. I've got a bunch of comics up here, like literacy of Marvel, the DC universe, tea literacy, like, do you like this tea or do you prefer a different tea? Why do you prefer it? What's the roast like in that tea? You know, you can be literate about tea, about games. Again, here's an old school, what is this thing? You know, what's that? What's different from this, which is a Game Boy Advance SP, right? So everything is literacy. So in that case, then it means that we're actually talking to everybody because we're all dealing with literacy in some way. Okay, so how do we, the aim of the talk is to think about how can we find this freedom to play as a literacy teacher. Okay, so in order to play them, we think that there's this kind of 5-step process that it's kind of a new idea for us. We've been playing with it for a while now, but we haven't really spoken about it in public yet, right, Jonathan?
Not yet. Not until now.
So first of all, to play, we need to know what the boundaries are. What are the edges? So we need to be cognizant of our constraints. So you need to know where you are currently. You know, what are the constraints upon you? Because play is, well, again, the famous quote is, it's the free movement within a more rigid structure. Okay, so we need to find out what is that rigid structure that is not oppressing us, but what it can be. But what are the constraints that we face as teachers? Then we can begin pushing on those boundaries. And there's ways to play that we think. You can play with this system, but how do we push and where? So we need to know how we can change our environment. That's step 2. So it's like thinking about the ways that we can play. Then we can start reconstructing or constructing a kind of playground that will let students play and will allow for gratifying experiences. This is step 3. So this is constructing a playground to let students play. So once the classroom has been reformed, it's time to open the doors and let everybody play. So here's a quick step. Know your constraints, understand the ways to play, build your playground, which is what we're going to do with ludic objects and practices we'll talk about later. Let students play. And then a step 5 is an additional step, is iterate, reflect, and share your playground with others. Okay. So the goal of the workshop is to encourage you to be more ludic, play with more ludic objects in order for you to find the freedom in your classrooms towards gratifying experiences for both you and your students. And this is from what we actually posted because we changed the talk, like our whole concept of, anyway, we changed everything like in the last couple of months. That's why there's an old version. Okay, so who am I? This is me. I'm James. I like Smash Brothers, Marvel Snap currently, techno and EDM. This is Jonathan. He likes the pedagogy of multiliteracies and Metal Gear Solid, as we just saw. Do you want to show your shrine again?
Sure. I'm always happy to show that off. Anybody? Right. So we've got 3, Peace Walker, 5, and I'm on 1, 2, and 4 right now. So
here are some things. Yeah, Marvel Snap. I can talk about that all day. Oh, that's Chris that posted that. Oh, okay, yeah, we can talk about that all day. I got Infinite this season, so let's go. Anyway, so some of the best bits. I've hosted game jams with students. So I had a Pick Away educational game jam, which was pretty cool. I also did interactive fiction game jams. I've done 2 of those using various kind of low-tech software. One is called Bitsy. I've had students participate in Reddit communities as part of English language teaching, which was just incredible. I won't go into it too much right now, but here's a slide of theirs. This student, they learn a lot of cyber pragmatics, basically like slang and stuff. So this is them reflecting on their experience. So this is a post that they found. This is how they participated by commenting. And, what did you learn? I learned slang, AF. I learned the heart. I learned that you can put U's out to make a longer kind of emphasis. And you got some upvotes. I've also worked on a task-based gaming class, which I'll talk about a little bit more later, but essentially using games as a tool for communication, for English communicative activities, where it takes about 7-8 weeks on a single game. This is what I'm calling a vaporwave approach to teaching. Again, bit of a spoiler for later. Jonathan, you want to go through yours real quick?
Yeah, sure. So James talked earlier about literacy, and after teaching for 30, almost 30 years now, I realized that everything I do is literacy based, or has been literacy based, where before I was having students experience a lot of things and not really doing anything with it, or discussing without having the experience or participation, or just participating. And so in the last 5-10 years, I've been trying to sequence them together better, where students are having some sort of meaningful experience for themselves, like reading a gaming magazine or playing a game, and then taking time to analyze and understand it, unpack it, connect it to society, look at biases, look at problems in society, and then think about how to apply and participate. So I've done that with, simply, if you go up a second, James, with a magazine, they can read a magazine, they can understand how a gaming magazine works, and then they can make their own gaming magazine and share it online on issue.com. Or that we ran a week-long game camp, so 50 contact hours, where students were playing all sorts of games, like video games, board games, card games, all sorts of things, and then unpacking games and game advertisements and industry language. So when someone goes to GDC or PAX, how do they talk about their game? And then students put together their own game, their own advertisement, using the rating systems, catch copy, and we had a mock event at the university where parents and teachers and friends came, right? So experience, analyze, and participate. And then now in the game to acquire, same thing, experience, conceptualize, analyze, and participate. So that's the fun theory, right? Where they turn some stairs into a piano. We unpacked what fun was. We did some research about plastic bag use in the community. Why do people use bags? Why don't they? And then a student made her own print and play game, right? That anybody could download, made a website, and got interviewed in the newspaper, right? And so I think if you just, for me, if I just do those 4 steps, magical things happen. Like really human restoring things happen when you take the time to play, to talk, and to let students participate as they wish in society, whatever that is.
Yep, some keywords right there. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
All right.
We're here
Who's
to
here
do,
today?
James.
Sorry.
That's what we're here to do, by the way, James.
Yeah, I know. I know. Who's here today? We just thought we'd take a little quick time. I guess we can't go through everyone because there's quite a few people, but if anyone particularly wants to say, hey, this is me, use the chat if you like as well. Or
yeah,
who are you?
If anybody just
context?
wants to, if anybody just wants to share, like shout out something, if you're doing awesome literacy work or Ludic things, or
there's a place for sharing later. I added it this morning, Jonathan.
Or if you hate Smash like I do, just go ahead, raise your hand. Smash is dumb. I'm incredibly, well, I'm not as Smash literate as you, but I dislike Smash. We can talk about that. See, people are agreeing with me. Nobody's like, typing things in support of Smash, James.
All right, I'll let everybody type in chat then. Okay, so please let us know who you are in chat. Yeah.
It's like
Smash Ultimate Coach over here. Nice.
Ooh.
From Brazil. Survival games. I enjoy playing Smash Brothers. Everyone's just talking about Smash now. YouTube, yeah, we know Zoe B. Incredible videos. I've been citing them. Zotero pulling in the site, the APA site details from YouTube videos. Very, very useful. All right, look, we've got 45 minutes left and we're not even started step 1 yet. So let's jump into the doc here. Play and constraints. So play is freedom with constraint. It's literacy. Here are some, I can see some introductions still coming in. Thanks a lot. Here are some ideas of constraints and how we can play with them. So here is some constraints on the left and the way that we can play with them on the right. So a haiku, it is a constraint of 575 syllables. You can confirm that this is actually 575. Spring term begins now. Classroom windows beg for play. Spring break dreams arise. Okay, that was actually created by ChatGPT. Pretty incredible, right? I said, make a haiku that's kind of sad and about school. And it was like, yeah, excellent. Okay, this one, so it's a Drake post, right? And this one means I don't like it. This one means I like it. So digital game-based learning, don't like it. Ludic Language Pedagogy, all day. 20 questions game, it's a game with 20 questions. You can play it with, okay, let's do Dungeons and Dragons, monsters only, etc., etc., etc. Okay. Metal Gear Solid is a single player video game. I created a LARP for the whole family to play around the house. Okay. So rigid structure. What about modern school system? How do teachers play within this school system? How do students play within this school system? What about academic publishing? That's a racket too, right? How do researchers play? Okay, we created our own open access journal, which we create crazy papers and pink stuff. So yeah, so essentially constraints, literacy, play, human restoration. Literacy is experience, understand, and apply. The more you know, the more you can play. So let's get into it. And finding the freedom to play. Know your constraints. Number 1, step 1. What are the obstacles, hurdles, and internal and external pressures that you face? We thought about these particularly as a starting point. Policy. How much control do you have? Are you mandated a curriculum? Are you being assessed as well as students? The idea of datification. Do students take standardized tests? Are there ways to hit targets in a more ludic way, perhaps? Do you have to use certain tools like EdTech encroaching? Do you have freedom to experiment with different tools? Do students have access to devices? Do you? Are you allowed to bring your own device, or are they banned, etc.? Financial constraints, pedagogical constraints. Did you receive training? Are the materials that you use designed with a specific way to play embedded? Physical environment. Is your classroom big enough? Do you have windows? We have a paper in our journal where literally the Spanish teacher was in the basement with no windows. What objects do you have or not have in your classroom? Emotional. Do you know your students' names? I don't. Sometimes in a big class, you can't know everybody's name, right? So, or maybe you could make the effort to. Do you talk about emotions with students? Do you feel comfortable talking about emotions? Do you know the underlying reasons for students' behavior, etc., etc.? there's a lot of constraints that we face. So it's writing time, guys. What are some of your constraints? Just off the top of your head, there's a little box here on page, what are we on now? 11 of 29. Look at that. We're smashing through it. What constraints do you face? What constraints do you face? To be honest, there's someone working in higher education. The constraints are much less. The problem with higher education, at least in Japan, is that the teachers are just lazy. Like the researchers, they couldn't care about teaching. It's much more about go in, read from a textbook, focus on other stuff. But at the lower levels, K-12, there's a ton of constraints. Multiple schools, look at that. Work at multiple schools. Bob is a fictional character, we'll delete him. No planning period, yeah. Rigid schedules, competition with other teachers. Ha 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 ha. Why don't my students want to do more projects, homework, activities? That's you, Jonathan.
It is.
That's not a constraint. That's just a question.
That's a huge constraint, right? But no, like that. The idea that, okay, then what's the constraint of that? Like student time, student literacy, student ambition, student motivation. I guess that's the constraint, right?
Yeah, an exact curriculum down to the day. Yeah, Zoe, I've been in a worse situation. Like literally, my whole curriculum was mandated by page numbers. It was like week 1, get to page 5. Week 2, get to page 10. Oh, that was depressing. Oh, I can make some more boxes. Chris, could you talk a little about this competition with other teachers?
Sure. I think this is something that a lot of teachers face. It was very interesting in my context, but the idea, and I'm sure many of you have felt this, where there is like that looming threat that if you try doing something new, that another teacher is going to like question you or bring it up with someone. There's a lot of like toxic office politics that happen in K-12 schools. And as I was kind of the person that, I'm sure this is also true of many of you, but like you kind of become that person, like, here's Chris with the weird ideas again. And over time, that lessens your ability to try out new things, because if you mess up a few times, or if you're always doing the weird thing, it can be more and more difficult to do more weird things. So in my environment too, we had like a very hands-off, I would say like a very hands-off approach from admin. So you're always kind of like a competition to do the best possible thing, which means like testing.
Yeah, it's kind of, I guess, my own experience is being kind of covert about it. You don't really want to show until you've got the results, right? Once you've got the results, you're like, well, look at all this amazing stuff kids have done in my class. Then it feels a bit more rewarding. But when you're still experimenting, things can go wrong. So yeah, look at this. We've got a piano teacher as well here. Scales our work. Meeting them where they're at. Wonderful. Wonderful to hear. Yeah. Steep or shallow learning curve. Yeah. I guess it means, yeah, meeting them where they're at. It's like, well, what songs are you interested in playing, right? Give them the choice of them choosing what they play. And if they want to get to that level, then you can support them. Yeah. Teach exactly how they want me to. Oh my God. That's oppressive as hell. Mm.
This is the place to hear constraints, eh, James?
Mm.
How many
Yeah.
are university teachers, or like high school, middle school, elementary? Okay, middle, yeah, Jacob, middle school, Hannah,
Oh yeah, that's a good, yeah.
elementary. Because yeah, like the university constraints are way different than other. Alternative, wow. Alternative high school, cool.
High school, alternative high school, adult education,
Middle
university.
school, middle school, ELA. Yeah. Middle high. So there it is, right? Like, so this is really interesting for us, you know, mostly having taught. James taught in an elementary school, but I've only pretty much been at the university level for, 25 years.
Yeah, so again, the point of this activity is for you to think about your own constraints. Like what are the constraints on you and how can they be pushed? And that's what I'd like to move on to, if that's okay. Thinking about how we can push on these constraints. Okay, so thank you for that. Again, this document's going to be around for you to check out later as well. So just going to move on then. Sorry for the quick move, but okay, so let's think about within these constraints, what are the ways to play? Okay. How can we play? So we think that the way that a teacher expresses their ludic nature, in other words, the way that they can be playful in their context, is with their pedagogical choices. So the methodology that they choose to adopt, kind of like a rule set, the materials that they design or use, worksheets, games, role plays, textbooks, etc. They're all things that can be played with, right? And the mediation that they do before, during, and after an activity. Think of it as DMing, guiding, supporting, scaffolding, modeling, etc. So this section unpacks how we get to this point, going through some, actually, we're not going to do that. That's gone now. Okay, so students, we come up with this kind of acronym that students need space to play. I should say I came up with this acronym. I'll claim it. So we need space to play. We looked at, as it mentioned there, and we've got a much longer document where we look at like the philosophical approach, like what is play? What are the main aspects of play from a philosophy bent? What are the main kind of ways to play from a critical pedagogy bent, from a literacy bent? Okay, so there's all these different angles that you can take, thinking about what play is and freedom. And if you boil it all down, it comes, well, there's perhaps some more, but I think that these are really key aspects of what it means to be a progressive, playful teacher. So you need a safe place. And this idea of safety, it refers to learning from failure, inclusivity, competence, and being a supportive teacher. Participation, so having an impact in society, the community of the classroom, outside the classroom, giving students choice in how they participate. That kind of leads to agency a little bit, but self-direction and the culture of the classroom, the culture of the student, the culture of the home, the culture outside the school, okay? Agency, autonomy, freedom, dialogue, interaction, improvisation. Critical, challenge things, be reflective, be interdisciplinary, be purposeful. And then the experiences of our students. So how related is the content to their lives? The identity, sharing identity, as a student, as a human, as an internet user, as a Smash lover. Make sure that it's relevant and meaningful. So yeah, space, that's what students and you need to play, especially in playgrounds. This is another key word that we're going to be talking about today. So give your students space to play. As a shortcut for the essence of playful ludic teaching, then let's keep these 5 words in mind. Okay. So I mentioned these as kind of driving principles of the classroom, or at least how to create gratifying experiences between you and students, have a safe, participatory, with agency, critical thinking, and experiences. But what about your own context? What are some kind of driving principles? What do you strive towards? See, Bob got up early and he wrote this before everybody came today.
Bob's a team player.
Yeah, voice and choice. There we go. Look, yeah. Values, yeah. Curiosity, wow, wonderful. I would lump that into participation and agency, right? Agency, the idea to give them the and learning from failure. You see, so there's a lot of connections between these terms. Good job, Space. You do a lot for me. Curiosity, you need that safety. You need that agency. New experience, creativity, challenge. Yes, exactly. Yeah, trying new things, pushing yourself. Let's delete Bob. Purpose. Iteration, nice. Action. Efficiency, effectiveness, interesting. So he has a great video about efficiency. I think that was the first video I watched, actually. That is you, right? Okay. Whew. Dodged a bullet there. Yeah, that was a wonderful video because I was thinking about Ludic. So let me just give you a bit of background. Thinking about, well, playful teaching, is it inherently inefficient? This was a big conundrum I had. I was like, it doesn't, because you're being playful, you're taking a kind of roundabout route to get to the same goal in a way. So does that mean it's inefficient? And is that bad? And then I stumbled upon your video and I was like, oh, thank goodness. If anyone wants to see Zoe's video, maybe you can share it in the chat. I can't remember what it's called. It's like in praise of inefficiency. Is that right? Yeah. Ignore all the Smash Brothers videos.
We have very different search histories, James.
In defense of inefficiency. Yeah, that was the one. Yeah, it's a great video, actually. You should all check it out. Copy clean link. There we go. Oh, that's not clean. You're not here to learn piano. You're here to learn how to study and get through hard things. Wow.
Beautiful.
Beautiful. Learning a skill is empowering.
Look at that.
Yeah.
Look at that. Yeah.
Yeah, wonderful points. Meaningfulness, yeah, it's in above. Iterative learning. We're going to talk about iterative teaching as well in a few minutes. We're only halfway through. This is going pretty good. Love, embodiment, joy, purpose, iteration. I see iteration a few times coming through here. Curiosity, care, yeah. Community, excellent. Building, community building, relationships, purpose. Some excellent keywords. So it seems like we're aware of our constraints. We have some ways that we like to play, some key terms for our how we can create. Again, the idea is that play is to create these gratifying experiences. Okay, education should be gratifying. It should be make you happy, right? So yeah. So moving on to number 3, building your playgrounds. All right. Take a look at this playground. It's by a company called Monstrum, who are based in Denmark, and they create just these wild fantasy playgrounds for people to play in. Don't know where I found out about them, but it really changed my way of thinking about teaching, thinking about creating playgrounds rather than games. Like the idea of the classroom as a game, like gamification, we can talk about that if you like later. But if you create like this winner takes all competitive situation where everything is for sale, like in the capital society that we are, then the classroom does it really need to be that competitive? Like if everything in the world is so competitive? Can't we make classrooms like a safe place to play, like a playground, rather than as a competitive game? That's the kind of vibe that we're going for here. So I want to create the best playgrounds for my students to play in. And what does that mean? Let's think about that, like the aesthetic, the flavor of that. So if we have these two things, yeah, we've got the playground slide here, and we've got snakes and ladders. What are the differences between these, like aesthetically, if you like? I don't have a table for this. I guess we can make one. That's the power of Google Docs, right? Insert table 2. Playground versus game. And then make it like that. All right. So what are the kind of core differences? What are the feelings? I mean, there's obviously an answer, right? There's more freedom to play in the playground. You know, the game, defined rules. Here we go. People are writing. I love this. Let's go. Space for imagination. Yeah. I mean, Jonathan often likes to talk about spinning around until he's sick in playgrounds, right, Jonathan?
I do that.
If one chooses to, one can.
I can do that.
Completely ignore the playground and search for pebbles in the mulch, right?
Yep.
Space for imagination. Collaboration requires listening. Defined rules. Let's give some positives to the game here. Clear goal. Gets boring over time. Well, this one certainly does. Mm-hmm. Yeah, winners and losers, right? Can use more of your senses. Don't knock the kid off the side. Yeah, that's a fantastic. Yeah. Social rules, constraints of physical. Immersive cultural artwork, defining. Yeah. Can be aimed at older audiences. I mean, there could be adults playgrounds. So just to go on.
Yeah, I was looking for adult summer science camps the other day. Like there really should be more. There are a few in the States, right? Like they're like adult summer camps, but they sort of seem like Tinder adjacent, right? But but like there should be more science camps. There should be like places where you can just like, you know, weigh sea turtles or count seagrass or something, you know. That would be a nice place for adults to play, I think.
So just while you're still typing, the idea here is that if we make our classrooms, well, our classrooms are already kind of games in a way. They're shitty games, but it's, you know, you're going to get a grade. You are being penalized for certain things. There are strict rules. Do this, do that, Timmy, you know. Whereas in the playground, like someone mentioned here, the rules are kind of socially defined. Like it's well, how are we going to play with this? Are we going to use this as a fort? Is the person that's at the top the winner? Can I go under the fort? You know, all these things that can be kind of decided as a team rather than as a set in stone set of rules before you get there. So I think that classrooms are already kind of structured as games, whereas if we make them as playgrounds, it opens up that opportunity for participation, collaboration, you know, working together and meaningful experiences. So that's what I mean by this metaphor of changing our perception of classrooms as games into playgrounds. So the way that we can embody these ways to play from step 2 is if we play with methods materials, and mediation. Okay, so this is our kind of ludic approach. So what we're going to do is we're going to play with methods. So this is how we teach. Okay, and this is what we say is bring out the ludic, bring out the playful in you. Okay, so your pedagogical design, the teaching methods. We can play with materials in our classroom, and these are what we call ludic objects. These are the physical objects that we use. These can be games, they can be puzzles, plays, theatre productions, poems, role plays, worksheets, activities, etc. So these are another way that we can play and create these, create space in the classroom. The third one is with mediation. So again, emphasizing the ludic in yourself. So how are you interacting with students? How are you framing the class? How are you explaining, helping, guiding, etc.? Okay, so there's two avenues here, the ludic in you and ludic objects. So we keep talking about ludic. What the hell is it? So we think it's being playful, where this manifests in two different ways. Through playful beings, i.e. the objects that are designed for play, and by being playful as a human. Okay, so there's kind of these two strands to it. So playful objects, playful ludic objects, we think of things like LARPs, debates, choose your own adventure books, card games, video games, escape rooms, board games, quizzes, role plays. Okay, these are all objects that are designed to be played with, right? Let me just show you this board just to make it a little bit clearer. Clearer, messier. So on the left here, we have a bunch of ludic objects. Okay, so these are objects that they're inherently designed to be played with. So we think if the materials that you use in class are ludic, then they're perhaps these things, right? They're maybe Minecraft, choose your own adventures, acting, debates, LARPs, etc. So the idea here is like, this is a clear ludic object. It's the Rubik's Cube. It's an object that's designed for play. Yeah. Whereas the hammer, it's not specifically designed to be played with. It's designed with a utilitarian goal of hammering nails into wood. However, it can be used as a playful device. And what we're saying here is that this is where we bring out the ludic in ourselves, right? The object itself is not playful. However, it can be played with if we bring our own ludic sensibilities to the object, right? So here are some ideas of, being playful, like ludic, being ludic. So we just had the Rubik's Cube, right? We said the Rubik's Cube is designed for play. Okay, so we're going to play with it. However, we can also bring our playfulness to the object and do stuff like this. This is just a Rubik's Cubes made into a collage of Will Smith's face, right? So it's a playful object being played with. So it's an idea of the ludic object plus the ludic in you merging together, which comes up with this kind of Ouroboros of ludic. It eats itself. Is it a playful object or is it designed with ludic in you, right? So it gets a little bit crazy. Again, here's another idea of being playful. This is the scorpion kick by the Colombian goalkeeper. He's playing football, which again is a kind of game, but he's choosing to save the ball by doing this scorpion kick. Yeah, so he's being playful. This is ludic in us. It's a game, but look. I'm sorry. You just lost. If you know what it is, it's the game. And the only way you can never win the game, as soon as you start thinking about the game, you lose. So yeah. If someone says you just lost, you think about the game and you lose the game. So yeah. Anyway, so this is our kind of broad swath of ludic objects, materials that is designed for play, and then the ludic in you, what you bring to your teaching. Okay. So ludic is basically a diverse range of objects and practices. Why get ludic? Well, I can bring about these gratifying, I was doing so well. Bring about these gratifying experiences for teachers. It's humanistic, can be transformative, and it allows students to flex their social gaming capital. So another little 5-minute challenge. How are you being ludic in your teaching, in your practices? Is there particular objects that you're creating that are playful and provide this space for students? How can you be more ludic? Do you want me to explain ludic in a bit more detail? you want me to show you some more examples? Let me know. Here are some more examples to whet your appetite. Oh, that's the Reddit project. Comics. Yeah, that was a crazy project. Zines. Again, zines are a kind of mini constraint, right? I had students, they had to write an essay, like a full research report in English. And it kind of freaked them out. So I said, okay, it's got to fit into an 8-page mini zine, which created a kind of extra constraint for them to play with him. Remixing games, role play, game-inspired worksheets. I taught Japanese with Minecraft mobs. We looked at comparison. So this mob is stronger than that mob kind of thing.
Zoe, did you traumatize your students with your McCarthy era anti-communist panic roleplay? No?
No.
Are you sure?
No.
Okay. Like, wow.
They actually, disappointingly, they found it very boring.
Whoa. Desensitized youth. Wow. Really?
A school-wide LARP for culture building. Incredible. Oh, this is Chris. Okay. God, of course it's Chris. I was like, wow, someone's done some wild stuff. And yeah, Chris. Analog instruments, yeah.
How did you set that up, Zoe? Like, like, did you brief them on, like, we're going to experience this? Is everyone okay with this? Is there consent? Let's try it, and then debrief? Or was it like, welcome to class, now you're a communist?
Yeah, there were, I'd have to actually like look at the worksheet,
Yeah.
but like I gave everybody roles and they had to like figure out who was who. I don't remember the details, but it may have been my fault that it wasn't very good.
No. Like,
we had one of the principles above about iteration. So if it's not good, that's fine. It's a first step, right? It's a draft.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was the last semester that I taught at that school, unfortunately.
It's really interesting because there are studies, like research projects where professors have done those sorts of LARPs and actually traumatized students, right? Of actually taking the ludic too far and actually bringing out students' stereotypes and racism in the classroom. Like the ludic of the roles and the class reinforced racism. So it's like, I'm just wondering like what sort of knife's edge you were on there. But if the students were bored, they were probably okay with it. Super interesting.
A debate game using playing cards. One thing that you should notice here that's coming up more and more is that, oh, that's slightly different. But as teachers, you know, we often use these analog, simple, frugal devices. Jonathan was talking earlier about print and play games, and this speaks a little bit to the research, the research versus practice divide in games and play in literacy teaching. In that, for example, from a second language perspective, researchers still got to massively multiplayer online role-playing games like World of Warcraft, whereas boots on the ground teachers like ourselves are like, meh, that's never going to be applicable in my context. And so the researchers are telling teachers to do gamification instead, as this kind of buzzword of, well, you know, if you don't have the funds to make a game in Unity for your class to teach them Chinese vocabulary, you know, you can gamify your classroom. And I think that this dichotomy is completely fake. And that if we think outside of ed tech and, digital games as the savior of education, we come back and be a little bit more frugal. Like I showed, you can use things. Okay, let's say you can't use Minecraft in the classroom. Well, you could design an activity around Minecraft. And why would you want to use Minecraft? Because it's familiar to the students. It connects to their identity as game players. So I think that there are ways around these barriers of, or at least hurdles of not being able to use particular devices and games in the classroom by bringing in the ludic from ourselves and saying, well, if I can't play Minecraft, then I can at least do other stuff.
So it's really interesting looking at these experiences because there is a theme of creation, right? Like we're talking about playgrounds where some people are using ready-made things in a new way, or some people are, so the teacher is creating a game, or students are creating games, or Thomas is building an entire sports program. Like there really is a sense of creation as play, right? Like if you don't have the freedom to play, make something that gives you a little bit more freedom. And I think that must be the hardest part in the whole human restoration project, right? Of helping people create something or be able to work within a constraint. Like James, you were saying with your zines, like making the zine isn't that tough for you, right? But perhaps that doesn't, well, maybe that butts against institutional constraints, right? Like there must be a really, Chris, like there must be a really interesting friction between the creation work that a teacher wants to do with the institution saying or not saying, no, you can't. I'd love to hear more about that, right, from other people about like, why did you decide like, all right, we're going to build an esports program now, like, or like there is a jump between school as a factory to building a theater, like a black box theater, right?
So let's get some voices. Chris, about your kind of ludic projects, I guess. I mentioned this word covert kind of teaching. Did you feel in the same way? Was your creations, was your experiments, I'm just going to do it, like screw the school, I'm just going to go for it? Or was it careful?
I taught in a very strange environment. So I taught at, I guess, what could be deemed like an alternative high school. So a school of choice, a public school. And the approach was very much hands off, which meant I had a lot of freedom to do whatever I wanted to do. But if someone like shot back and said that's not what you should be doing, it was up for me to defend it. So there wasn't necessarily support in that way, but there was support in being able to tackle projects. So we did a lot of really out there stuff. I put, that LARP was probably one of the weirdest things I ever did. We did, like the first 3 days of school, I was the kind of guy in charge of that. Like a lot of people do like culture building activities the first 3 days. And we went all out and had the kids make each advisory have like their own backstories. The kids would like make like what land they were from, like their costumes. We had like recycled Goodwill fabric, just ridiculous stuff. And they would have like their own like place on this massive map that we combined together at the end.
So you just had a lot of freedom to play, right? You personally had a lot of freedom to play.
There was a ton of freedom. So we were able
I'd love to hear from someone that feels like they don't have any freedom to play. Would anyone like to speak up about trying to do interesting, space safe, participatory agency, these keywords? Like, how are you trying to bring about this within your own context with like no freedom? Who would like to speak up on that? I'd love to hear from you. It really is important, like a K-12 teacher or something. It's like, well, I've got these standardized tests, but this is how I'm kind of subverting it. Come on, don't be shy. We're all friends here.
So when I taught in a traditional high school, I was teaching Spanish, and I did not have hardly any freedom to play. My constraints were technology and space, like physical space, and the teachers around me not supporting any kind of like innovation. And also I was a second-year teacher creating my curriculum from scratch. Like, so that was both like room to play, but also a constraint. Like I had I didn't have a jumping off point at all. It was kind of just like flailing in thin air. So that can be a difficult constraint as well. I tried a lot of things that I thought would go really well, that just absolutely flopped. we had some things that went well, you know, like we did like a unit on vocabulary for like going to the store or like bartering in a market. And my students actually created products, and we held our own little like mini craft fair. And that went really well with one class and it went terribly with another. So yeah, I don't know. The freedom to play can go a lot of different directions, I guess.
That's kind of speaks to the freedom to play, though, right? You never know quite what's going to happen with it as well. If you can set up for example, you set up the metaphor of setting up the playground and say, okay, kids, go and play. Some of the kids, some of the people that interact with that will do it in a way that's amazing, and then other kids will be like, what? And that perhaps speaks to their prior educational experiences as well. It's like, if it's not something that they're used to or familiar with, then it can flop. Yeah. So that's when our mediation and our support as teachers can help them there as well. But yeah, wonderful stuff. So I don't know if we've actually taught you anything today. We've kind of talked a little bit about this idea of freedom to play. We're going to have to kind of do a speed rush through the end here. Let's think. Okay, step 4. Let students play. So all this is just me and Jonathan showing off a little bit, like the way that we've thought about constraints, the way that we've played, like the idea of space, and the playgrounds that we built and how students played with them. So it's just kind of like ideas. We can skip through a lot of this because would you like to know more? No, because we don't have enough time. So yeah, this is some ideas of, for example, having to teach the test. We thought about ludic ways of teaching, freedom to play, challenging canons, being reflective. Jonathan, unofficially not asking for permission to play games in warm-ups, then having students play and discuss games, and having students design role plays to apply the test material they have to study. Okay, these are just ways that we've worked around our own constraints. Step number 5 is all about iteration. So once you've created your playground for your students, iterate on it. It's going to fail. I failed hard at the start. I wrote a paper in 2020 about moving from a flipped learning approach to a vaporwave approach. If you're familiar with vaporwave music, it's like slowed down music. So I'm thinking about slowing down teaching rather than having like teaching be like hardcore or nightcore, for example. Yeah, nightcore is the complete opposite of vaporwave. Anyway, so instead of teaching a very fast approach, my flipped learning approach to teaching was, okay, week 1, you're going to learn about the curriculum. Week 2, you're going to play a game. Week number 3, you're going to play another game. Week number 4, you're going to play another game. Week number 5, another game and another game. And it just, all of the flipped learning approaches, okay, do all the reading and the hard stuff at home, come into class and we'll discuss it and do the kind of output materials. So learning the rules for homework and transcribing their gameplay recordings for homework. Thing is, no student really did it. So you'd come to class and you're like, right, we're going to play game 1 now, right? You all read the rule book, didn't you? Nah, no one read the rule book. But the vaporwave approach, as you can see here, we've got a single game. And instead of like changing the game every week, we just like slowed down and said, okay, let's learn how to actually play it all together as a team, as a full class, right? So that's the first class, learning how to play. Then week number 3, let's actually play it in class, reflect on it, replay it, and then reflect and report on it. So yeah, slow your teaching down if you have the opportunity to. Okay. Then once you've made your playground, once you've tested it, you've iterated it from something that was completely bogus to something that actually works and students are learning now, where to share it with colleagues in blog posts, tweets, video essays, Discord communities, local newspapers, your school bulletin, academic journal. That one's hard, we know. So I've gone through that last part pretty quick, but let's get social. Where are you publishing stuff? Where are you? What are your links? Where can we get in touch with you? Please feel free to add your details to our document here. And at the very bottom of this document, we have some ideas of, well, we talked about playing with methods, materials, and mediation techniques. We've got, in the appendix, we've got ideas for you to think about how you can play with methods. So from the idea of literacy teaching, of experiencing something, conceptualizing and analyzing it, applying that or participating. So these are all different ways that you can think about playing in your context. So do you want students to debrief? Do you want students to hypothesize? Do you want students to keep a diary? Do you want students to think about critical pedagogy? Do you want students to compare and contrast biases, right? These are all things that you can actually have students do in your classroom in terms of methods, materials. There is a link to another Canopio board, which has some ideas of materials. And then finally, mediation. So these are the ways that teachers can have an impact on what students do, with some ideas about gameplay as well. So there's some appendix, and there was something.
You should totally talk about the elephant in the classroom.
Well, we kind of did talk about game-based learning and gamification a little bit. Like, essentially, don't gamify your classroom, because you're just adding another layer of bullshit. So yeah, but we totally support the idea of using games as tools within the classroom, like to be poked with, you know. So I think that it kind of sounds a bit hypocritical, that like, whoa, you know, you don't support gamification, which is kind of like a game, but you like games. Like, what's all that about? Well, I think that framing the classroom as a game, like doing this gamification stuff, it just kind of reinforces what's already there, these, you know, constraints. Whereas using games as tools to be poked and analyzed within the classroom is totally fine, in my opinion. Games are great. Yeah, that was a little bit rushed at the end there, but I hope you yeah.
And then people know that we have a Discord as well, right? That if people want to talk more about things related to Ludic language, literacy, pedagogy, we do have a Discord as well that people can join. Where did we share that, James? Did we? Yeah, it's on page 2. Who we are. It's on page 2. There it is. Thank you. Thanks, Nick.
Yeah, so the idea of this talk was not that we're going to give you like the best game to use in your classroom to teach Spanish vocabulary, right? Because there
which would be Smash, right? Like, because Smash is the best game
or chess,
Spanish vocabulary.
Yeah, or Marvel's Snap, right? There is no best game. It's all about what you do in creating that structure, you know? So if you came here thinking, I'm going to get the 10 best games to use to teach literacy skills, unfortunately,
well,
because of the indie
okay, so like if you jump into
games.
our Discord, we'd be happy. I'd be happy to talk about that. Like, there are really great games for teaching literacy, and there are great things to do with those games for teaching literacy, right? Like, depending on how much freedom you have to play. If it's only like, okay, I can give a student a game for homework, I can recommend some interesting literacy games. But if you've got a little bit more freedom, let's take those great literacy games and build in some other literacy activities around them and do some really impressive things, right?
All right, that's all we got, Chris and Nick. Thank you so much for coming along in this late evening time. For us, we're just getting warmed up. It's 10 a.m. here. But yeah,
this has been amazing, James and Jonathan. Yeah, we got time for questions here. If anyone wants to take a few seconds here to ask any like final questions, this is great. I really appreciate just like the almost lo-fi Google document nature to it. It is very cool, very simple, something that everybody's used to. Thank you so much. Definitely people should go on your Discord and learn more about the different things that you all are creating, because there's a lot of like that vaporwave paper.
A vaporwave paper, yeah, definitely one of my favorite things I ever wrote.
Yeah, I mean, it even just aesthetically is very interesting for a research paper.
Yeah, let's get it. There it is.
Yeah, if anybody has no, keep it up, man.
Yeah, it is. There it is.
We'll just vibe on it a little bit, right? Yeah, if anybody has any questions, like we have some example questions on page 25 of the doc. But if people want to just push back, poke holes in our argument, I always like that. Play with us.
Well, it sounds like everybody's ready to take on next steps. Again,
Olivia's got a question.
Oh, we got a question.
A question?
Maybe not.
Oh, we got one question. Stephanie.
This might really up this one, but where does the
Olivia,
word
we
ludic
can't
come
hear
from?
you. Sorry. No.
Where does the word ludic come from?
Oh,
just answer this one real quick. It basically comes from the word to play. So it's used in kind of modern game studies as a particular kind of play, basically. Zimmerman used it as the ludic, the manifesto for the ludic century. So it's saying that, you know, this year, this century will be defined by games and play and systems. So it's basically, yeah, it means playful. Think about the word ludicrous as well. It kind of relates to that. Yeah. Yeah, lucid. Olivia, we can hear you then.
Awesome. So I'm in a little bit of a different situation than most people. I'm the piano teacher.
Okay.
One of my big problems is that I have students who will drop. They start to get really good, and by the time we can start introducing play and creativity and group collaboration, they've been doing this for a few years and they're tired or they get distracted or there's something else going on. My question is, how can I prioritize like growth and play? Because they're almost like opposites.
Why are they opposites? Like when I was learning guitar, like I was learning scales and I was learning chords and I was learning progressions, but I was also just messing around with like hitting my guitar with drumsticks and putting batteries under the pickups and stuff like that. Like what is the relationship in a piano curriculum between mastery and play? Like why are they opposites in your context?
I would say that it kind of, in some ways they're not, but in a lot of ways they are. So like, because I have so many students who are younger, they have approximately like a good 15 minutes of attention and then a bad 15 minutes of attention, and then the lesson is over. A lot of them are constrained with, they don't have the freedom to play piano in a quiet environment or to pick up an instrument and do what they want when they want, because they have just a couple hours after class, after school, before dinner to like actually sit down and do anything. And so they're often distracted and the skills don't get built. It's hard for me to get them to do things that are boring. The best solution I have for scales is like scale races.
Yeah.
But because a lot of them are like, okay, well, I could do something more fun, or I could sit down and do a scale. If I can do a scale, I can play something fast. But because I don't know how to do the scale, I'm going to try to do, like, they try to run before they walk.
Okay.
Personally, I just think that giving students the choice of what they want to play could be kind of that liberating force, you know, or get them to record themselves, share it on social media, you know, this idea of the participatory side of things.
Mm-hmm. And that can work after like 2 years when they can actually play like the Disney songs they want to play. But but with piano, it has like a really high floor for what you need to even just start to play sheet music. And that's the same for like a lot of other instruments. It's just that like with piano, you've got the two hands in addition to everything else going on.
Performances, maybe my own kids actually both play piano, and they have a performance every 6 months that they need to prepare for. So that's kind of a goal setting, I guess.
My kids also mess around on the piano, and most of the time when they play the keyboard, like they will express themselves. They'll say like, I'm feeling angry, so I'm going to play this way, or I'm feeling joyful and I'm going to mess around. Like it sounds awful, right? But they're trying to get their emotions out through music, where it doesn't sound like it is music. It doesn't sound great, but it's them just getting an emotion out, right? Like I had a bad day, so I'm going to bang on the keys. Or, oh wow, I'm like this girl talked to me today, so I feel this way. Is it possible to play like that? Like just to have like sort of emotion driven 3 minutes of trying to express yourself using a piece of technology, like using an instrument?
I could actually incorporate that into at the midpoint for lessons. That could work.
Like just a break, right? Like, how are you feeling? Bang, 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 right?
Especially as like, again, attention spans tend to like lengthen as a kid gets older, but when they're young, it's like, I can do 5 minutes and then I can do, that's it.
Yep, that'd be neat. Wow. Like it's literally called playing the piano.
Yeah, no, I know. And by the time I can get them up and it's like, okay, we're going to do this riff. And what's going to happen is you're going to sit here and play this riff. They're going to play that riff. And then you're all going to play together. And it's like, they can't both play and listen until they get enough skill underneath them.
Yeah.
To cooperate with other people. Like it's hard.
Yeah, well, maybe it's also like about participation. Like I'm just looking at the space to play. Like we just talked about like freedom and agency, but there's also society and participation. Like if they're working together, does that help them? Like, hey, you guys are a band, you guys are a chorus, you guys are like working together. Like, how do you sound today? Like, how do you feel? Does that help? Like, is there a community between the piano students, or are they completely in their own little cubicles and not interested in what other people are doing?
It depends on the students. Right now, they're all kind of cubicalized, which is like very frustrating. But I could maybe even because the Zoom would be hard. You can't.
It'd be interesting.
I don't know if the timing will work out. Like there'd be so much lag.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or maybe, like,
why don't you get them to
think,
make something, send it to the friend, remix it, send it to the friend, remix it. There's lots of ways to play. Yeah.
Okay. I could do that.
During Zoom, like people were definitely, during COVID, like people were definitely sending piano riffs to each other and vocal tracks and like putting together 1,000 people choruses of Beethoven's Ninth and things like that. Like, 3 piano, I would help kickstart your album of 3 5-year-olds expressing angst on keyboards. Let me know. I would definitely kickstart that.
It's actually the next Daniel Johnston album.
Sweet. Perfect. Yeah. It's really interesting. Super interesting. I love the example though of music, right? As a literacy, as expression.
Chris is here to say you don't have to go home, but you can't stay here, right? So
I do. I'll do the final question,
just
so we address all of them, from Thomas here in the chat, which is he's just talking about the connection between what you're researching and how play is the primary mode of learning for most mammals.
Yeah,
the
I
idea
looked at that as well.
Like things, everything kind of learns through play. Like, what's your thoughts on like the biomimicry or like just being an animal component?
Yeah, I mean, it does go that deep, doesn't it? I mean, Piaget talks about it as well, right? Like learning through play. So, yeah. But yeah, the animal stuff, it's Brown, isn't it? 2009, his book on play, that looks at animals and kittens and dolphins and all sorts.
So I did some work with the game Pandemic, not for the pandemic in cooperation, but actually because in the game, there are roles that you have to play, like a medic or a researcher or a scientist. And I and my student used the game to teach other students. We debriefed it and we talked about playing a role in society, like that idea of like how animals learn to hunt from their parents, or are this biomimicry. Like people also are learning to play roles. Like I did a PhD, so I looked up to my professors and I emulated them. I learned how to talk like them. I learned how to present at conferences from watching other people. And so we used the board game Pandemic to look at those roles. And we asked students, like, what is your role now? Like, who are the roles around you? What social capital do you have? What roles do you want to play? What roles are difficult for you? Because in Japan, there's, and Jenkins and MIT talked about this as well, like the participation gap, right? Even though that students might want to make something, they don't know how to do it. Like, or they might not have the access or the equity to do it, right? And so giving students a role to play gives them that identity work and gives them a role model and gives them the knowledge that there is the sort of person out there that I want to be. That's a big part of the stuff that I do with literacy, because I think literacy is participation, right? Like we're researchers, or we're teachers, or we're YouTubers, or whatever. That role gives us a safe space to act like other people, and also to find our own freedom through imagination and play. So that's a big part of my work.
Yeah, but it doesn't go back right the way down. It doesn't go as deep as mammals and play, right? Or animals and play. And
I don't cite that in my papers.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
It is something I've thought about.
There's a paper, I don't have it on top of my mind, but the idea of forest schools and playing in the forest, and how
sure
people playing outside versus not playing outside affected their ability on several different metrics. And yeah, that's kind of interesting research that I think is perhaps as deep as I go in terms of other species and play, and how that relates to my classroom teaching. But yeah.
Cool.
Interesting.
Well, I think, yeah, I mean,
thanks for sticking around, everyone. Yeah,
I mean, there's so many questions I'm sure that could be asked, and for real, just go join their Discord and keep the conversation going. There's a lot of great stuff going on in there. You can find that again if you go into our Discord and just go to where it says other Discords, the channel. It'll be in there, and you can find it. Otherwise, I'm sure someone will link it to you if you ask. Otherwise, again, James and Jonathan, thank you so much for being here, presenting on this stuff. Super unique, super cool, very applicable, which is always nice to the work that we can be doing here. So thanks again. I appreciate you all joining us super late, and we'll see you tomorrow at the conference.